in Europe, while this is going on, and it is ironic that the Southern seeking of support from Europe just never materializes. From the outset, they expected that they would need that support in order to win the war, which might have been a true assessment of the situation, but they were wrong about expecting European powers, particularly England, to come in on their side. Because of that, that link, that economic link to England, and also the sort of social or class link. Aristocracy and business classes saw some affinity with Southern sort of plantation lifestyle. There's something feudal about that. But common people, especially in England, as we mentioned, related to the book Uncle Tom's Cabin, typically supported the North. And as the war went on, the Union gets around this sort of economic tie between the South and Britain by, as they're taking over Southern territory, taking over agricultural areas such that they could ship cotton and food supplies and whatnot to Europe, so that there isn't that lack is not felt so much. Additionally, the South had been exporting such large amounts of cotton that Britain and the other European nations had surpluses, and they didn't need to import anymore during the time. They could just go off of their current stocks. But the Southerners definitely believed Britain would come in on their side because of the cotton connection. As the war got going, Lincoln really starts bending some rules, I guess you could say, both constitutionally and as far as keeping the border states in. The border states, the book refers to it as dubious methods, or methods that Lincoln's using that are not totally fully legal, including sending troops in to make sure folks are voting the right way, quote unquote, as well as a few of these other means. So it's not as if Lincoln's above bar on this. And as the war gets going, he also, he suspends habeas corpus, arrests some folks who are critical of him, including newspaper editors. Starts to do things which go beyond the scope of the power probably constitutionally given to the president, which in a lot of ways confirmed Southerners' assessment of Lincoln and the federal government, that they were out of control, that they were going to do things beyond their appointed duties. So at the outset of the war, we've got strengths and weaknesses. For the North, manpower related to those immigrants, especially industry, just much more built up, much more diversified. They're the only ones really with a navy to speak of, which will become a crucial element. Eventually, they have sort of a moral justification as well concerning slavery. And the border states stay with the Union. These are states with a lot of industrial power, a lot of large populations, and the fact that they stay with the North is huge. Weaknesses: terrible leadership in the military, really a trial and error process for finding good leaders, as well as having some leaders which are good at some things and horrible at others. So McClellan's good at organizing the army, or good at implementing good discipline and that sort of thing, but bad as far as being really unaggressive. Another weakness is that they're fighting on the offensive. They have to go into new territory they're not familiar with. They have to fight against fortified positions more often than not. And there's also this potential of Britain and France, Britain and/or France, joining on the southern side. So potential of a larger war. The North doesn't have much reason to suspect that Britain or France will come in on their side. So they're looking at possibly a much larger engagement. But the naval power and the economic power really seemed to win the day eventually for the North. On the other side, with the South, we've got talented officers, including Lee and Longstreet and others we talked about during the class. They're fighting a defensive war. In a sense, they're bred to fight. By that meaning, because of a more agricultural base, economically, much more used to, for example, riding horses, spending lots of time out of doors, shooting guns, and they don't have to win to win. They just have to succeed in seceding. That is, just not be bothered about leaving the Union. And they're fighting for really causes they believe in. The self-determination thing is huge. There's throughout the world, I mean, especially after World War I, but throughout the world generally, there's tons of unlikely victories fought by people who are fighting for their rights to do what they want as a smaller section of a larger country. There's tons of civil wars and revolutions that are successful based on this motivation. It's a strong morale booster. Weaknesses, really the opposite of what the North has going on. Industry is a problem, manpower is a problem, both in terms of the ability to recruit soldiers, but also the ability to manage the sort of economic backbone in the background, because there's such a slave-based economy in the South. Lack of supplies, lack of good supply lines is part of that. And really, they don't succeed in breaking through the Union naval blockade to the extent possible, or to the extent necessary to get out of this, the Anaconda Plan, or just the stranglehold blockade. Even though ultimately the blockade is not so strong that it couldn't possibly have been broken if Britain ever really wanted to, but they didn't really want to, so it just didn't happen. All right, First Battle of Manassas, also known as Bull Run. It's really the first military engagement of the war. And at this point, Lincoln and others really, we're talking in Northern attitudes here, expect an extremely short war. Actually, all sides do. Now that the war is going to happen, Southerners expect, in a sense, to be let off the hook, to be let out of the Union after a little bit of fighting about it. And Northerners expect just to win outright, and to have sort of a return of the status quo. But this is the first battle in which people are really killed on either side. And it is an ironic battle because even though the Confederacy won, they lost in the sense that they lost some momentum, because Southerners were looking at this battle and saying, "Oh, great, we won! Like now they're thinking the war is going to be short. Now they're thinking they don't need me in the army. I can just go back home now." So there's some desertions. There's a reduction in recruitment power, but really the opposite happens for the Union. They see, no, this isn't going to be a 90-day war. We need a lot more than 75,000 troops involved. And they start to take the war seriously. So the Southerners' sort of overconfidence comes back to bite them, and the Northern sort of realization that this is going to be a big deal is helpful for the Northern cause. Similar to how Fort Sumter worked, I guess you could say, but now in a much more concrete way. Peninsula Campaign. Now, early on, as part of just the overall strategy, McClellan decides taking Richmond, the Southern capital,